Okay, so today what I've got for you guys is a little sci-fi kind of case box kind of deal. Um, Now this video is mainly intended for my modeling and texturing 2 students as an example to kind of go through step by step through the Maya file, which you YouTube viewers will not have access to the Maya file, but um, my students do. So anyway, um, the first thing I am going to do is walk you through this Maya file um, and why it goes step by step and how I got to the end results here, the low poly and high poly. Um, if you are one of my students, you have access to the this step-by-step Maya file as well as the high poly and low poly FBX files that we're going to import into um, Substance Painter, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about particles and smart masks, and yeah, that's that's about it for today. Okay, so this shouldn't be too long of a video. So we are going to start with the Maya file. So if we look at step 1, basically, um, we have just a basic cube that I've divided up so I could make my first manipulations to it to get the shape that I wanted. So if I actually turn on the wireframes here, you can see step 2. So what I did was I held down shift, made a copy, and then moved um, these edges according to my concept, which I didn't have concept art, I just had a concept in my head. So basically we went like this, and then like this. So now we have um, this part, and then I'm going to go ahead and go back to object mode. We're just going to move this down the line here. So the next thing I did, you can see I did the offsets for these. Now, in my head, this is like a container kind of object, and these strips going across the center are like light bars. Um, so what I did for these is went to face mode and grab those, Control E. Now in this case, I can keep faces together. I did an offset, so let's go maybe 1.75. That'll work. And I want to select a number that um, I can repeat across all these. So um, that way all of them are even. And you may say, well, why don't I select all of these at the same time? Um, it will not work correctly. So like if I did this with keep faces on and then did that offset, it's actually going to treat that all as one big um, selection, obviously. So we have to go strip by strip, but it's not complicated. And remember, if you want to repeat a command, you can just hit G. So I'm just selecting my faces, hitting G, going here, 1.75, and I'm done. So I'm going to do this, and this, Control E. Okay, so that gave me this, okay? And then if I move this on down the line, if we look at this one, the next thing that I did was doing the extrudes. So I've got an extrude going in, and then another one, and then an offset on each of these. So for this, I did the extrudes on the strips separate from the extrude of the division of the top and bottom half, because I want the extrude depth on the light strip things to be different than that gap. So I just hit Control E, keep faces together, and extrude it in just a little. There we go. And then I am actually going to extrude it a second time, so I'm just going to hit Control E again. So there's my second time. And then I'm going to hit Control E again. And I'm going to do a very small offset. Okay, so that gets me to that. Now we have to add um, the extrude here in the center, so I'm just going to extrude that in just a little bit and do a second extrude. Maybe not quite that deep. Maybe we'll go right about there. All right, and then that brings us to the next step. So the next step was performing some bevels. So if I wanted the box to have a semi-angular look like this one, what I did, and you notice I'm maintaining nice quad topology across this whole thing, because if you don't have nice clean topology, yeah, it will make your modeling life a nightmare. So I selected all these edges here, and go into Edit Mesh and Bevel. And that gives me this. Now, if I wanted something a little less angular, like this, then I would do the bevel and add maybe four segments in there. Okay, so that gets you to this one. Okay, and then if we look, all of these lights and the little gap here, I've added just a small bevel to those edges because I'm going to turn off the wireframe. Okay, if we look at this, that is really super sharp and not very pretty to look at. This one has just a little bit of smoothness to those edges, which catches the light just a little bit nicer. So, but just like I tell you, students, if you can get away with a bevel on an edge versus smoothing it like crazy, which I did here, always go with a bevel over a smooth. So for these, all I did, was went through, selected all of these, and now this gap between the halves of the case, because they're not continuous edge loops because of the topology, it can be a little more complicated to select those edges. But if you take your time and select them correctly, you should be good. And that's also why I stress stay as low poly as you can for as long as you can, and then you won't have problems. So you can see here I accidentally deselected these edges that I wanted to include in this, but since they are perfect edge loops, they are super simple to reselect. Okay, so it looks like I got everything. And then I'm just going to go to Edit Mesh and Bevel and zoom in here a little bit. And I don't really want a 0.5. I think we're going to go with a 0.25. And let's go 3. Dink. So now we have this, which looks pretty nice. And then I took that and I decided I wanted to add these handles to the case. So all I had to do there was grab these faces, do an extrude, Control E. And I'm just going to do an offset. And I'm going to scale these so they are as close to being a square as I can get. And then we're going to go multi-cut and middle click so it goes right in the middle. So now I have 8 points that I can deal with, or 8 points that I can work with. So at that point, all I have to do is select those vertices, scale, and I get a cylinder. Do the same thing over here. There we go. And then once I had that, then I can do the handles themselves, which are just a simple extrude with an offset, an extrude, and then bevel those edges. So I am just going to select these faces, select those faces, Control E. We're going to do an extrude with an offset. Hit Control E again. Do just an offset. Hit Control E again. This time, do an extrude. And there's the handle. And then all I have to do is go in here and bevel. And there's that. And then for the handles here, I'm just going to make a copy of this one and show it to you. I just started with a cube, deleted the end caps and the bottom, and then selected the 2 top edges and did a bevel, and then placed it into the handle area here. So if I actually just grab these and make a copy, I'm just going to pop these in here. There we go. go. All right. And then the next step was to take that object with its separate pieces and combine them together. So I went ahead and combined that all together. Selected all the pieces. Hit combine. There you go. And now it's ready to unwrap. So here's this all ready to go, and then that brought me to these two versions, which I stepped through and did the UV unwrap on this. So broke it up into the top and the bottom and the light strips. I cover UV unwrap in some of my other tutorials, so I'm not going to go too in depth on it here. And then same thing for the high poly version, which for the high poly all I did was I took this one, applied 2 levels of mesh smoothing, and there you go. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up for the step-by-step of this simple little box. And as you can tell, even doing it in real time, it only took me, 20 minutes. So now I'll show you a little bit of the Substance Painter into this. So I took this one and exported them as a high and a low FBX file. So here I've already set up my Substance Painter file, went to File New, brought in my model. Once again, that's covered in some of my other videos. So like I've talked about before, first thing you usually want to do is go in and bake your mesh maps, because especially smart materials are dependent on these maps having already been baked. So we're going to use the low poly as the high poly and select 4096 and hit OK. All right. Now we have something to work with. So, like I said, you can start with base materials to get you started, but don't always depend on presets. So, like if I went to smart materials, basically a smart material is a regular material that you've layered on generators and other stuff. So we have something like this, which is a base painted metal, and then we have rust on top of it. So you can add to this, or we can make our own. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now using generators and smart masks. Okay, so let's say we want this to be a steel box that is painted olive drab green. So we're going to go for a painted steel. So we're going to start with this steel. Okay, so there's my base metal. Okay, and then we're going to add some paint on top of it that we're going to scratch up and dirty up, and hey, it's the inside of the box. And you'll see the base metal underneath. So to create that paint, we're going to add a fill layer. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to give it a nice like olive drab green color. We don't need any emissive or normal or opacity information or height really on this one. And then we're going to give it mostly rough. Okay. Or you can go a little bit shiny with your paint if you want to. And add a little bit of metallic so it's more like a, you know, like a painted metal. All right, so how do we get the steel that's underneath here to show up? Well, that is where smart masks come in and generators. So I can go in here and I can add a black mask, which gets rid of everything, okay? And I could use my brushes to paint this in where I want it to be, okay? So I can select, say, a dirt brush, right? And I could paint that that paint on here by hand in certain areas, right? But that might not be what we want, which, as a matter of fact, that's not what we want. So I'm going to back that up. If I right-click on the mask and I go Add Generator, I can add things like curvature, which will just put the paint at those curvature points, which does not look right at all. Okay? So you can build your own generators and stuff too, but we're not going to go into that right now. You can add things like dripping rust, okay? Which once again doesn't fit what we need, okay? So I can take that mask out Okay, so that's generators, which we're going to use a generator for the dirt here in a minute. I just wanted to show you where it was. So if we go down here to smart masks, you've got all these fun things. Okay, so we want basically edgeware. Okay, so we don't want surface rust. Let's go with maybe gun edges. So I'm just going to drag that up here, and that's going to put it into this mask. Now, you can see that it chipped away the paint, but it chipped away too much. And in fact, we probably want that the exact opposite. So how do we do that? Well, you're going to go to Mask Editor, Global Invert. And now we're getting somewhere, okay? And you can go in here and you can make it a little less chipped up, or you can really scratch it up, okay? So I'm going to break it up a little bit. All right, that works for me. Yep, I'm happy with this. Okay, so let's say I'm happy with that, which I just did. Okay, so let's say we want to add some dirt in here, okay? Now you can layer a whole bunch of these on top, okay? But this is just where they are. You can also go in here and right click and add paint. Okay, now what that's going to do is say that there's areas that I don't like where the generator put it. So maybe I want to, paint some of my material back in. I can edit that by using painting into the mask. Okay, so I can add some of that in. And you can always turn that on and off. So, all right. So let's say we want to add some rust into the cracks here. So I am going to make a fill layer. I'm going to give it maybe a dark, dirty kind of brown, reddish brown. We'll increase the metallic a little bit. Make it a little more rough. And that kind of gives us a little bit of a start. And we could add maybe into the height Maybe something like that. Okay. And then we're going to break that up. So I'm going to right click and add a mask. And then I'm going to add a generator. And I'm going to do dripping rust. So now I've got rusty spots. Okay. And they're pitting the surface and eating away at it. Okay. And if that's too much or not in the right places, or you want to paint some of it away, you can always add paint. You can paint more in. You can change your brush and paint some of that rust out of there. Okay. You can go into the mask here and you can switch this up to your heart's content. Okay. And then I am going to add one more layer with some dirt. I'm going to add a fill layer. I'm going to add pretty much black. Super, super dark brown. No metallic. Fully rough. We don't need emissive, normal, opacity, or height turned on. Now here I'm going to use one of the smart masks. And I am going to use maybe dusty dirt, or I'm going to use the dust occlusion. So that gets it up in the cracks there. So I can increase that a little bit. So now that really makes it pop a little bit more. Okay. And so that's basically, oh, and then we've got particles, which I'm going to show you. So I am going to just add a standard layer. Okay. And then I'm going to go to particles. And we've got all these really cool things over here. So I'm going to set up a material, let's say maybe some kind of a bloody red liquid. And I will use, let's say rain maybe. And I'm going to use the particle, and I'm just going to go like this. And it's basically going to rain that red liquid down onto my object. Okay. So you can see it's just hitting the top, but not the bottom. Okay? Just like rain dripping down the sides. It's a cool effect. So maybe I want to add some burn spots, okay? So I could make this black and fully rough and do a burn in here. So maybe it caught fire. So you can add some burn effects in there. Okay. So the particle brushes are pretty fun to play with. You got things like fractures. So it will spread out throughout the model. Being black, it's not really showing up too much, but you can see where it's doing that, which is cool for like cracked glass and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think I'll add a couple little extra things here to this just to finish up. So just kind of stand by and you can see what I'm going to do. So I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to make this a red emissive. You know what? Actually, let's make it a green emissive material. And I'm going to add a black mask. And then I'm going to go here to the polygon fill, go with my UV chunk, select my light strips, and then now those are glowing. So if it's not showing up, I can adjust the emissive intensity and the add post effects and glare. And I'm going to turn down that emissive just a little. So now that's glowing. Adjust this a little bit. Okay. So we got a nice little green glow going on there. And the cool thing is with fill layers, I can always change this to whatever I want. So maybe I want it to be blue. And then I can come in here, grab a smart material, let's say bronze armor. And I'm actually going to place this bronze armor underneath my dirt, rust, and grime. And then I am going to add a black mask, use the polygon select with UV chunk, and I'm going to make that my handles. So now the handles have a different material. And then I'm going to add a standard layer. I'm going to put this above my other base materials because I still want rust and everything else on top of what I'm about to do. So now I'm going to grab a brush, basic hard round brush, and we're going to go, doesn't need a metallic. We'll increase the height just a little so it's sitting above the surface. I'm going to make it a yellow paint. Maybe a little bit darker. There we go. And make it somewhat rough, but and then I'm gonna look for font, and we're gonna go with this one. Which puts it in the alpha. Stamp that in there. And you can see that the rust and the dirt and everything is interacting with that because we placed this on a layer below. So it's just like Photoshop, basically. Let's see. Let's use that one. And let's use that guy. Make this stuff look dangerous. So there we go. There's the finished little object. Okay. So, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Um, any questions? If you're one of my students, you have my email. If you don't have my email, feel free to leave a comment below. And yeah, have a good one.